You need to watch this if you crave deeper meaning. Are you ready to follow the thread into revelation? This is the Institute of Applied Metaphysics. I'm Amy Fox, guiding you through hidden corridors of thought. Join me with James Renford Powell as we unlock esoteric insight from the Church of Revelation. Small whispers, big truths. This is where metaphysics meets the modern mind. Listen in.
Hello. I have been a friend of Jem's for like many years now. It's been about 15 years or so, and I became a student at the school in about 2010, and I learned so much about how to think in a way that creates positive living, and learned so many things about just really all around. How to apply the universal laws in your daily life, and how doing that in a way that's constructive actually gave me a much more healthy and positive life. And I'm still a student, and would like Jim to join us here.
Good to be here.
It's good to have you. So how's the weather in Memphis today?
Well, it's been very stormy recently, but today was hot and nice day.
Yeah, it's been pretty nice today, but it's been stormy for a while in Ohio. So yeah, so I have I could go on forever about how much the school has affected my life, how much I feel like I learned how to think in a way that's very constructive after applying some of the things I learned. But I thought maybe I would ask you a few questions about like how the school got started, and things like understandings of the laws and what you would like to share. So how did the institute get started?
Well, it was a rather strange way of going about it, but my wife and I were missionary teachers in Vietnam. We arrived there in August of '66, and it was definitely during the war. We had to get through the Tet Offensive, which was attacks again on the cities all over. But part of the contract was that we would learn a local language, and we had a choice between Montagnard and Chinese or Vietnamese. And we were located in the Chinese section of the city, which is called Cholan. And my wife was teaching in the American Vietnamese International School, and I was going to the University of Saigon School of Living Languages to study Chinese. And about half of the students in the class were Buddhist monks, and about half were regular college students there. And to establish a rapport with those Chinese students, I was reading things like the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, and the Confucius, Analects of Confucius, and Dhammapada the Buddhist, and so forth. And I would find some statement of principle. And I go back to my wife and I said, "Who do you think said that?" And she'd say, "Jesus." I said, "No, that was Lao Tzu." And then I'd find some other statement or principle. It sounded so familiar to me because I was a Bible student in college before going. And after the second or third time, she said, "I don't want to hear this anymore." Now, she was more intuitive than I am, and she knew this. She felt like this was going to be big problems. We're over there as missionaries, and I'm in here talking about what the Buddhists and the Taoists say. But of course, I kept studying it, and it made me really go back and start looking at why these sounded so familiar. And one place I found they began to find the answer was where in Matthew 13, 34 and 35, where Jesus said, "I came to reveal the secrets that have lain hidden from the foundations of the earth." So my father was a minister. I've heard him speak all of my life. I don't remember anybody talking about the secrets. And then is the place where the apostles asked him why he taught in parables. And he said, to you, I have revealed the mysteries. He said, this people's heart is waxed gross and their ears are dull of hearing, their eyes are closed. In other words, I've got to tell them in parables so they can relate to it. And then later, when he is being interrogated by Pontius Pilate, he refused to answer any questions, but he did say, reiterated, I came to reveal the truths. So the question to me was, what are the truths, the mysteries, the secrets? What's he talking about? Where would you look for them? Well, since the scriptures say that he spoke to them in parables and without parables spoke he not, I started studying the parables all over again, looking at what principle is being taught. Well, that ended up in a book eventually called The Revealer. And it became the basis of my study over the next 4 or 5 years. And I didn't know how many there were. And I finally came to a conclusion after going through 6 and 9 and 12 and 13. I finally came to the conclusion there were 13 because each one of them is connected to the other. And that was really the beginning. Now, my wife and I spent 20 years abroad. We were 4.5 years in Vietnam, and then from there to Hong Kong for 8 years. And from Hong Kong I was in Bangkok for about 7 months. And then to the Middle East, Bahrain. And I traveled all over the GCC countries, Gulf Cooperation Council states. And then moved to Cyprus for 2 years and England for 2 years and came back to the United States in 1986. So we left in 66 and came back in 86. So once back, then I began even though I'd been doing some writing, I really got more serious about it once back. And my office at that time was in the Clark Tower, which is a lot of people around this part would know. And I was working in venture capital funding for businesses. And after work by 5:30 or 6, since my family had moved to Anchorage for a while, I would head to the donut shop and start writing. So that's the beginning. And the Renford books were never properly promoted. In other words, there were never any launches. And the books range in size from, I guess the majority are around 250 to 320 pages. 2 of them are over 500. A lot of them are in the 150 range. But they were written and basically slotted into the Institute because I founded the Institute of Applied Metaphysics and then created the Church of Revelation as a support or action outreach program of the school. The school has 3 degree levels, 20 courses per level. And these books, many of them became text in the school. And that was the beginning. Now we have all of the books available on, you can find them on A Book in You, ABOOK, the letter N and the letter U.com. All of the books are there. They're also on the website iam-core.org. They are all going up onto Amazon. About 15 of them are up there now. And you can see them together if you go to amazon.com/author/Renford. You'll find them up there. But it's only once we started putting them on Amazon that they began to have some exposure to the general public. It was never meant for it to be some kind of elite thing, but it was meant to be for people who are really interested in the process of evolution and unfoldment, who are looking to understand things better. And while they're there, they still are not widely known, even though they're getting there. The once they were on Amazon, we began to get people who were writing reviews and found that it's pretty interesting. A lot of people will be interested in reading one or two books that are not interested in a 20 course the first level or any levels. They just want to read a book. So we're making them available that way, and in some cases bundling them, like the Mysteries Revealed, the Metaphysical Bible, the Language of the Mind, and the book Metaphysics. Kind of probably should be bundled together. People who are interested in that particular subject. Other books. There are 7 different genres, and not that I even knew what a genre was, but I was writing to a different reader. And for instance, a lot of people don't care what Jesus or Buddha had to say, but they're real interested in what Vince Lombardi, Lou Holtz, and Bear Bryant had to say. So I wrote a book called The Rules of the Game. So all of the quotes are of sports figures.
Mm-hmm.
They're the same 13 principles, but they're being delivered to somebody who might not read about them any other way. And then a lot of people are primarily interested in success and money and financial success. And if it's not got to do with that, they're not going to read it. So I wrote a book called The Laws of Material Wealth. It has workbooks and DVDs and things with it. So they will, to be available to the general public, will probably require multiple marketing streams because it's a different markets.
Wow. I've read a few of your books, The House That Namu Built, and The Core Principles. I have a couple others I've read as well, and I find I've actually read a handful, and I find that each book is The Rules of the Game. I've read it as well, and each book, describes the laws in a way that relates to, I think, this. If you're interested in like that subject, you would read that book. You would read how that subject relates to the universal laws. I think that it's really interesting that you can find the laws, it seems, in everything. And I found that I realized that when studying with your school,
Well, they are, pardon the wording, but they are ubiquitous. You can't get away from the laws. It's like the law of gravity. It's there. You don't really get away from it. These are permanent laws that have always been in place. And if anybody wants to know how that came about, you can look at Proverbs 8:22 in the Bible, and it talks about what had to come before there could be the first clod of earth. There had to be those rules, and we know it's true. I mean, we know that you got a checkerboard there. It's a checkerboard or it's a chessboard. Mm-hmm. What makes chess and checkers are the rules of the game. And you can take your baseball bat and gloves and go to the biggest football field that you can find, and you won't play a second of football, because what makes football are the rules of the game of football. That's why you got all those referees running around there to make sure that they stay within the rules of the game of football. Well, if everything has principles and laws, then doesn't it make sense that the game of life has its own set of rules and laws? And if you want to have a harmonious life and learn and fulfill your purpose for being here, mm-hmm. you need to know the rules of the game of life. Awesome. And it's not like the 10 Commandments where you memorize thou shalt not, this, that, and the other. The universal laws are principles that you can identify and verify in your own life experiences. All right. It's not important about others. It's each individual. It's this process of identifying and verifying them from things that have happened to you. So I tell the students, and you've probably heard me say before, that I can make 3 promises about this. One is that it is self-verifiable. You don't need a doctor, a mullah, a pastor, a rabbi or anybody else, this is something you have to do yourself because they don't know your life experiences. And when you sometimes identify and verify a certain principle, I mean, you literally feel it. And it's like little epiphanies. And you think, oh, I know what that, I understand that principle because of this, that, and the other that happened to me. So that's the first promise I make everyone is self-verify. I'm not asking people to believe me. I don't need any ditto heads. I don't want to wear a white top and a turban and be your guru. I'm suggesting to anybody that you can identify and verify these laws for yourself. And the second thing that I promise them is that once you have identified and verified that law, a law, or especially if you've been able to identify and verify them all, you'll never be in a coffee shop wondering what hit you, or walking down the street feeling like the world is caving in. If you're in a coffee shop, it's because you're enjoying your coffee and figuring out your next move. It will not be because you don't know what's going on. Because one who has identified and verified those principles is really in an advanced state of awareness, right? You know, you're not looking at a belief system. The world is full of belief systems. Every church is a belief system. Every religion is a belief system. And that's fine. If you want to adopt a belief system, that's fine. But if you can adopt that belief system based on what you know, that makes it a much more beneficial exercise, right? So this is, and in fact, I have a book called Where One Comes to Know. That's the logo for the Institute of Applied Metaphysics. It's about knowing, not belief system. Not asking anybody to believe, asking you if you are interested in this process to identify and verify those principles for yourself. And the third thing that I promise the students is that once you've identified and verified those laws, every time you read a book, every time you watch a TV show, every time you listen to a speaker, even if you hear somebody bloviating at a party, you're going to know almost immediately where they're coming from. Whether it's academia, religious dogma, something that they've learned from some teacher somewhere, all right? And you don't have to tell them, hey, you're full of it, but it is important that you know. And what I'm saying is if you've identified and verified the laws, you know. Whenever you hear somebody speak, you know immediately where they're coming from.
I think it's really interesting to be able to know is, the answer, in my opinion, like when I was deep into studying the school at the beginning, and I was applying the laws the best I understood to my life and verifying them in my daily experiences, I was much more conscious the way that I lived. As you said, it's an awareness, and I was much more aware of how I was thinking in a way that was in tune with what is positive thinking and for me, not things that are just like living a day unconsciously. I was consciously creating or co-creating my life, and I was aware of that. So that's what I think is so special about the school, is that I was able to think in a way that I was so conscious of, like, my relationship with each law and how to apply it to my daily life. I just thought that it was really interesting.
Well, a lot of people think that they can use the universal laws like a tool,
Right?
but that's not really the way it works. You come into harmony with the laws. All right. How do you take, for example, if you're on top of a building or in an airplane? How do you come into harmony with the law of gravity? If you're jumping out of that airplane, you better have a parachute. The parachute is how you're coming into harmony with the law of gravity, and all of the laws are the same. Now they're definitions. In fact, in a lot of my books, I give a definition of each one of those 13 principles. But that's my definition. And when you go, each individual that's going through the process of identifying and verifying that law is literally creating his definition, his understanding or her understanding based on her life experiences or his life experiences related to that law. And they're just there. And they've always been there. And they had to be there before, as Proverbs says, the first clod of earth. It had to be in place. And before you can play one single minute of football, you have to have the rules of the game of football or any other thing that you may do. We tend to discount laws like traffic laws and other things like this. The speed limit may be 55, but we don't have any problem driving 70. That's just people. That's just us, how we are. But the fact is that these principles or some type of rules are always in play in virtually everything. And even though those laws change, those universal laws do not change. They are the same, and they have always been the same, and they remain the same. And I would say to anybody who's interested in the process of becoming aware, self-aware, or developing understanding, or some people think that they can sit down and meditate and all of a sudden a light will come down, or there'll be somebody that will endow them with understanding by the touch of a hand or something. But this is a process. This is not a miracle thing, but that's what most people have in mind. There's a story in the Bible of a guy named Naaman, who was sent by a king in Syria, and he was sent to the king there, and he knew that, or he felt that this God of the Jews was very powerful, and so he wanted him to heal this man because this man was one of his top generals. And so when he came, of course, it scared the devil out of the king because he knew he couldn't do anything about it. But Samuel said, "Just send him to me." So when Naaman arrived, he sent him and his entourage to Samuel's house, and Samuel didn't even bother to come out. He just told him, "Go dip in the river Jordan 7 times and you'll be healed," because he had leprosy. Right? And the guy got all ticked off because he thought this was beneath him. He said, "Aren't the rivers in Syria just as powerful as the Jordan River?" And he's about to leave, and his servant said, "If he had asked you to do some great something, wouldn't you have done it?" And Naaman changed his mind and went and dipped in the river Jordan 7 times and was healed. All right. When they asked Naaman about it, he said, "I thought that the prophet would come out and wave his hands over the place and call on his God to heal me." And, in other words, he was expecting some kind of spectacular event. And I think too many people go in search of awareness, thinking that at some point some guru is going to touch their hand and cause them to suddenly be enlightened, or that there's going to have to be some kind of spectacular thing. But it's a process. Mm-hmm. And if one is going through the process of identifying and verifying each law, it may be on a very rudimentary scale basis initially. Sometimes 10 years after the fact, I would have something happen to make me think, man, I didn't think about that law. For instance, I had to make a speech one time on forgiveness. And in the very process of doing my study on it, it hit me that forgiveness is a part of the law of giving and receiving. That's where it comes from. That's what it actually is all about. And to give a brief introduction, one of the laws is the law of being, that universal law of being, which has to do with our innate powers, what we're born with, what we have to work with. And then the law of unity, absolute unity, and the law of proper perspective, and the law of attraction. Now, you hear people talk about the law of attraction. They have whole schools out there teaching the law of attraction. But that's sort of like giving somebody a 13-piece puzzle and expecting them to be able to solve things with one piece of it, because the law of attraction is one of the 13 universal principles. And of course, the law of relativity The law of giving and receiving, as I mentioned, the law of righteous self-interest, which has to do with sticking with your primary purpose, and the law of love, which is what connects everything. In fact, that's the unified field that the scientists are always looking for and hadn't figured it out yet. But these are the principles, and you can find them in books. I have books. This one is called The Core Teachings. It is a lengthy book, but it's a book you can read like any other book, or you can take each one of the universal laws and start in the front of the book and see what the Vedic writer said about that law. Then see what the Tao Te Ching said about that law, and what Buddha said about that law, and what Jesus said about it, and follow that string all the way through. Then go back and take another one of those 13 and do the same thing with it. And I don't believe, if you're intellectually honest, that you can do that without identifying and verifying the laws. That one book will help in that process. There are 41 Renford books material. This is the catalog, and about 34 or 5 of them are books. The others are workbooks, manuals, and catalogs. And but we are in the process of getting them all up onto Amazon right now, and also working on audio books.
Well, when you mentioned earlier that the laws is something that you come into harmony with, is that just naturally by kind of the unfoldment of studying and verifying and knowing in your knowing what that is how do you know, instead of, as you said earlier, you don't use the laws as a tool because they exist already, they're already here in place. So to come into harmony with the laws, do you suggest that that's just a natural unfoldment you're talking about?
I think that when you become aware of anything, sometimes a person is, I'll give you an example, thinks they're talking too much, or they're smoking, or they're eating too much, or whatever it is, habit they want to break. Once you are aware that you have that habit, then we generally start watching. It's observation. Those are the 4 pillars of awareness. One is identification, verification, observation, and meditation. Right. The first 3, identification, verification, and observation, are something you do on a conscious level. You're consciously thinking about, I got to do this, right? When you get to meditation, you'll find that you're going into an intuitive stage, and there's a whole lot more to be learned there than it is in the conscious stage. But if you're not set with the conscious stage, the other stage, the intuitive stage, doesn't come about. So if one is just going through this process of identifying and verifying, especially when you get into observation where you're watching others and you're watching yourself, what you do, then you begin to realize it's not a matter of you using the laws, it's just a matter of you getting into harmony with it, getting into the traces with it.
Interesting. And as far as the Core Documents book, is that the book you would start out with?
The Core Teachings book? The Core Teachings book is it might be boring for some people on the front end. The book, The Searcher's Roadmap, and the 4 pillars are good introductory books that where one can become familiar with that terminology. You have people who've written for years. People like Charles Hannell wrote The Master Key. Even Napoleon Hill, when he wrote Think and Grow Rich, he talked about the 13 principles. Even though he didn't go into a great deal of detail on each one, he did cover some of them in some detail. Aldous Huxley, who is a famous old philosopher, wrote a book called The Perennial Philosophy, and he talks about the 13 principles. But there are people who've written, I mean, Deepak Chopra wrote about the 7 spiritual laws. I don't know what he did with the other 6. You have some that write about the 21 principles and so forth, but I found these were duplicating, and after some years, I decided on the 13 principles, and because each one of them is connected to the other. And it is just a matter of becoming aware of them and then watching yourself.
So just thinking about the things I was reflecting on. You have a time that you think it would take a person to complete, say there are 3 levels, right? The first and second. Mm-hmm. Is there a time you think it would take if you applied yourself in a reasonable time to complete the first and then all 3 levels of the school?
Well, this program is, we want to develop instructors, and you talked to one of them earlier, Isaac Coleman. These are people come along that can, so that each student is has an instructor that they can ask questions of. But the program was actually designed to be done by anybody, anywhere, anytime, on their own. Mm-hmm. And you read the book and you answer the questions, you send them in, you move to the next book. So there are people who go through them pretty quickly. I had a lady out of Chicago that she went through the first level in about 6 or 7 weeks. And I don't know she must not have had any, any work or thing that she had to do outside of that, because it takes a little time to read the book and answer the questions. But a person could read the book, answer the questions, and go through them. There are scholarships available, but one could do that on their own without ever talking to an instructor or ever talking to me. And but I like having somebody around that can kind of discuss with an individual, with a student, not so much to teach as to share their experiences. Like you're talking about your experience with the school. That's helpful to some people. Some people don't want to be bothered with that. They want to read the book themselves, answer the questions, and go on. But that's up to the individual.
Yeah. Well, do you have a place physically where the school is? I know when I was living there in Memphis, we had a place we went physically, but is there currently a place physically, or is this all more, as you said, we do it at our own pace and can have an instructor or not?
Well, I would like to have a facility, but at this stage, it's more important that we have some other things completed. Mm-hmm. And then I think when the time is right, we'll do that. But this is basically online. Everything is online and on the phone. And I don't want to waste the money on a fancy building. I think we could use a facility where classes could be run. But those who are studying these principles and go and involved with the institute are all over the place. They're not all in one place. And so I do not have a school type facility, and not looking at that may occur, but the main point is to make the information available and help people through the process.
So is the church a part of the school, or is that actually something different? Is the institute, like, are they kind of a part of the same thing, or?
No, the Church of Revelation was established, and it is a totally different thing than faith-based. It's a knowing-based, and it strictly runs along with the school and is there to assist. Some people find that it's easier to work through, a community outreach if they're working through a church. So if one completes the first level, that's the Universal Law Society, ULS level, then they are eligible for ordination as a minister teacher with the Church of Revelation. And if they complete when they complete the second level, they can be ordained as a master teacher. And then the third level is as a doctor metaphysician. So that's the three levels and how it corresponds with the church. The church is really a community outreach program. That's there for that. But one can study at the institute, go through, and never have anything, never be ordained, and never have anything to do with the church. That's up to the individual. There's no attempt at proselyting from any church or to recruit the members that way. It's people who want to be a member say they want to be a member, and that's that. And they utilize it to whatever effect they can and want to.
I see. I think the time that I have, been studying with you, I feel like there's something that it tells me, I have a lot to learn still, about the level of the laws you can actually understand. The deeper you understand them, the closer you are to something that is very very sacred to me. I think that the laws are here to keep us in unity, kind of with our own way, the way things already are. And I think the church and the school has shown me that it's very important to be in tune with the way things are and how the laws govern our own personal lives. How I think that it's so interesting that I didn't mean to bring the laws back up, but I just think it's interesting that they all relate to each other in this way, perfect balance.
Most everything you find in our world of belief systems and churches and so forth smack of control, if you ask me. I mean, if you're a seminary student and you don't answer the questions the way that professor wants you to, you're not going to pass. And if you do pass and you are ordained with this church and you get out and you start teaching something else, or you get off of the track, they will defrock you so fast it'll make your head spin. It's a control factor. And that's why if you walk around or drive around Memphis, you'll see many totally independent churches that are owned by the minister who started his own, not connected with any synod or church council or anything. So I'm much more concerned with helping people learn how to know than I am to teach any kind of belief system. Yeah. Just I don't really mind what you want to believe. Whatever anybody wants to believe is up to them. But if they have been able to identify and verify the laws in their own life experiences, it makes their process of choosing some organization or some belief system more tenable. At least they know what it's all about. Yeah.
Well, I think that it's a lot of good information. I think that the application is what I learned from the school and from you personally. Honestly, I learned that it doesn't matter how much wisdom you learn if you don't apply it. And that's why I'm so appreciative of that insight. You have to apply what you know in your daily life. The wisdom, it can sit with it. But if you actually, live by that wisdom and by your understandings and your application of the laws in your life, you actually are able to, be able to see the change in your daily life and your thoughts and, just seeing kind of how things work. It's really fascinating.
There's a kind of a humorous story about a woman who was in such bad financial situation that she decided there was no way out unless she won the lottery. So she prayed every day for 365 days, Lord, let me win the lottery. And on the 365th day, she kind of complained. She said, Lord, I've been praying for 365 days that you let me win the lottery and nothing's happened. And a voice out of heaven said, buy a ticket. In other words, action is required. Action on our part is required. So you can read the books, but if you don't apply it, if you don't work toward the process of identifying and verifying the laws, you're not gonna. It's just like reading a comic book or any other book that you had to take in school, and you had to do it whether you wanted to or not. Are there people asking questions that you would like to have answered?
I see we've got a little chat going. Oh, Dr. James Renford Powell is living legend among us. Yes.
This is coming from Sir Isaac Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
He has a crew. He's a physical fitness instructor, and he's also doing a class one night a week on the laws. Did you say that you had anybody with questions or not?
I personally don't have anyone, but you can all type your questions in, right? I assume they can type their questions in.
So is that like a chat thing?
Yeah.
Okay. So if anybody has any questions while we're talking, just put your question in there, and you'll get Amy's experience with the question, and I can answer it as best I can.
Anybody have any questions?
Let me invite you to go to YouTube, and when you get to YouTube, type in Renford Broadcast Network. Mm-hmm. It's RENFORD Broadcast Network, and there you can see somewhere close to 80 interviews, and some of these are religious and spiritual leaders. Everything from a Jesuit priest to a Tibetan monk to street preachers. And basically I'm drawing out from them what they started as and how they came to be doing what they're doing. And as Dr. Phil would say, how's it working for you?
Okay, great.
There's a question up there that says, what can you expect to achieve after going through this teaching? Well, you can expect to have full awareness of what you're here for, or at least be in a mode where you can learn what you're here for. There's a purpose. We have a purpose. It's not just all by accident, and it's not just to do the best we can. It is to remember what you came here for and who you are. And I believe that this process of identifying and verifying the laws accomplishes that. And you're seeing some of the pictures in the background are people that were interviewed. There's Mr. Sharif, who is a imam at one of the largest mosques here. And others were it's a wide variety of people from all different types of religion, and some like even agnostics, people who don't are not even sure whether there's God or not, type of thing. So it's kind of a real experience. It's kind of adventure to go in and see why people are doing what they're doing and where they started from, and Um, that picture in the middle there is the Renford affirmations. And I ask students to read that. I give them a sheet with that on it. I ask you to read that for 27 days. But even within the first week, a lot of them will come back saying, telling me all these different things that have happened. And I even had a guy come one time and say, "What is this, some kind of voodoo?" He said, I was reading this out loud every day, and all of a sudden this happened and that happened. Well, we're so inundated with negativity and fear-based thinking, even from fellow family members and everybody around us, that reading those affirmations once a day out loud is like opening the window and getting some fresh air. You get to, you find that things start to happen because you're stating them aloud, and that's a good way to start learning something about the laws, because those are not just regular affirmations. These are the 13 principles are embedded in those affirmations. So it's very much worthwhile. And if you want to send me an email, IAMRENFORD, IamRenford@gmail. I'll send you one of the affirmation, or possibly other things depending on what you need.
I actually have mine hanging up. You can see it right on my fridge right there. I have my affirmations hanging up right on my fridge right there.
It looks like a question here. Which Asian country were you all in when you discovered the connection between the universal law? I was in Vietnam. This is the war years. I was there from August 66 to December 70. And I was, like I said, when I began, I was really attempting to establish a rapport with my Chinese students. I was in my early 20s as they, and they would give me a book or that book. We'd have a discussion and say, "Well, you ought to read this book or you ought to read that book," and I'd do that. And that's when I began to find statements of principles that corresponded with what I had learned as a theology student in college. Mr. Armstrong, this is Mr. Eric Armstrong. He's a whiz kid techie. Mr. Armstrong asked, "What can one expect to achieve after going through this teaching?" Well, it's like if you go to a football game and you're watching 11 people on one side and 11 people on the other side, and they're running around banging into each other, and one's trying to go one way and one's trying to go the other, and you've never seen a football game before, it's a little difficult to enjoy the game. But once you know the rules of the game, a whole new world opens up for you. And when one knows the rules of the game of life, there's a whole new world there for you, because you become aware of what you're here for, and it may help in determining what you want to accomplish for the rest of your life. I hope that's answered your questions. If it not, call me after the show. We'll talk some more. Well, Amy, I want to congratulate you on your first podcast. You're getting it off the ground. I hope this will be a good start for you. And I appreciate you inviting me early on. And I hope to look in on you on your future podcast. And it's very nice, the introduction to Mr. Marcus, who is your moderator. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's great to have you. I've felt blessed with the knowledge of the things you shared with me, and I think that we all really appreciate your wisdom, and would love to know more, about the school, and I think you've given information, to share with your YouTube channel and things, and your email address. And I wanted to say personally, my life was in very deep harmony whenever I follow the laws, and also am doing the school and the affirmations. And I'm just being very honest. I felt a lot of peace. I felt a lot of just understanding. Oh, that's kind of how this works. Understanding the process and verifying the laws. I felt like I was able to be more connected to myself and also my daily life. So I very much appreciate your wisdom and everything that you have shared. And thank Marcus for hosting the space.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good night.
Thank you.
So I'm very grateful for Jim sharing with us a little about the school and the church, and his wisdom on universal laws and how applying them in your daily life actually makes you a lot more conscious and aware of how to live a much more deeper life of understanding the way the universe works, and how when we live in harmony instead of fighting, the way things are, the way they're just naturally in place, when we live in harmony with them, our life is much, much more meaningful. So thank Marcus for allowing the space for us to have our podcast, and thank Jim for sharing his time with us.
(2023) Mother Gaia, third dimensional planet, ascending. Thank you from the Sacred Light Broadcast Network and Sacred Light Productions for tapping in and tuning in to all live and replay content, holistic, conscious, for your empowerment. Tap in to the Christ light within. Please like, share, and subscribe. And remember that you are the one that you have been looking for. Enjoy this content. If you would like to collaborate or receive production through myself, Marcus Crystallite, direct message or email me at marcustut23@gmail.com to discuss details. Wholeness and balanced love. Ashe.